Welcome to part two of the Splinternet and the Death of Globalization. Um, I see that there's yes. At last, again, we've started at the same time, at the right time, and I'm waiting for Meticulous Prime to come on. Um, and last week, as I said, I'm in this period where I'm kind of recovering from these last 2 years, which has been grueling. And and because I'm just recovering, I'm in this like really exploratory phase. And I realized that last week, in the meandering that I took, that I was actually exploring a terrain and didn't realize that actually it was fundamentally connected to the Splinternet and the death of globalization. And I think in the discussions that we have today, I think that's going to become clear. Um, I don't know how you guys are, and who's here. I'm just waiting for Meticulous. I can't see him at all. Um, yeah, but yeah, I see we got some old. Salim is here. Billy Bumbo is here. How are you? Vicky Patterson. Nice to meet you. Um, but yeah, so this today we're really going to be drilling into that, and I just like to talk about what the Splinternet is, because basically what the Splinternet is that when the internet was started, it was started as basically a DoD, a Department of Defense project, or its ideas were integrated into Department of Defense project, um, and on the ARPA, and eventually it split. Okay, no, and but eventually that was extended, and it was a project designed to survive nuclear war. Okay, and and it was envisaged as this heterogeneous network. So a network that in which you could have many different types of ways of connecting. It could be wired, it could be wireless, it could be satellite, but um, but integrated by a single protocol, right? One single protocol, and and that and that has survived, and that has been built, and it in the 90s it became or Licklider, actually, the person, the scientist who really began to envisage it before the project would emerge in the 60s. He thought of it as the intergalactic network. So there was a whole idea of universality in it. And so in the 90s, the internet emerges as this universal project, but built in the but actually built in the industrial, the technological industrial military complex of the United States. And and so what happened is that as actors like China and so on came on board, then what and in particular when Hawaii uh, uh, began to jump ahead to the definition of 6G, then I think at that point for me the writing was on the wall, because it was very clear that the United States could no longer dominate this universal project. And so with many of the things that we're seeing now the emergence of a regionalism on the part of the West. The West is looking for a regionalism. The Chinese want to continue the globalism, but but in a global economy designed upon the kind of post Bretton Woods um, um, infrastructure, the West could no longer dominate. And I think we'll be exploring that. Let me invite Meticulous back in again. Yeah. So that's a background to the Splinternet and the death of globalism. and then and also looking at how we got here and what it means. I've just invited Meticulous in. If you have any comments, questions, especially from last week, etc., please drop them in the chat. But remember to save them so that you can drop the questions in the comments in the comments of the video when we post it, because we need to, if we can get that, then we can keep some of those conversations going, and there can be some run over over the weeks into some of the issues we discuss. Yeah, I'm now waiting for Meticulous to join. He's on.
Yes, I'm on. It's worked.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having some strange issue with my server, and I hope that it now doesn't throw me out again.
Okay.
When I say strange, is because I don't quite understand why it goes off. I don't understand that yet, but
yeah,
here we are.
Just one thing before you start. Robert Romano, who is a regular, has done a piece on commons. Right, an introduction to commons. So I think it's very important. Go and have a look at that.
I definitely will. I'm looking at the Substack page right now, and I will definitely find it.
Yeah,
I'll find it. I'll make sure to find it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So here we are, and I missed about 7 minutes. I was trying to get on, but couldn't. And I wonder what I've missed, because the Splinternet and the end of globalism is quite spectrum, and I wonder whether you've touched on it already.
Well, I was giving just a definition of the Splinternet. So I ran through that, and how it was related to, so how the internet arose, and how its imagination of universality is no longer tenable for the United States if it is to remain the hegemon that controls it.
This is such an important point because, of course, of the naivety that accompanied the reception of the internet by the public at large. And there's always, it seems today, even more starkly understandable than it was in the past. There's always a whole range of implications of this technological innovation that the makers seem to consider irrelevant to explain or unnecessary to disclose to the public at large. And as time advances, the Google slogan, "Don't do evil," appears more and more as a deliberate misdirection. As a deliberate misdirection, because the type of implication that the architecture of the internet as it was made public mandatorily brought along with it is the erosion of that distinction between the public, the private, and the intimate. The erosion of the distinction between the public, the private, and the intimate seems to have been something that those who created these technologies sensed was going to unfold from this technology anyhow. And the public simply wasn't informed, wasn't educated, wasn't equipped with a sense of protection of one's intimacy and one's privacy in light of this sprawling, ubiquitous technology. At least, just one more sentence, at least in those countries, in those spaces, in those states that had internet coverage, and I'm thinking at the back of my mind of the notion of the digital divide, which is another aspect of the Splinternet, in a sense, where large swaths of the planet for a long time, until very recently, didn't have the immediate access to internet infrastructure that the West and the OECD countries had.
Okay. So, this is the document, sorry.
On distributed communications. Let me see. Introduction to distributed communications. Let me see if you scroll it a bit. If you move a bit to your right, communications networks. Okay, I see that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
the Rand
trying to get my head.
Corporation. It's the Rand Corporation.
It's the Rand Corporation that did this, right?
So
And this is,
you read stuff like that.
yeah. Okay. And I think if you read this document, you're under no illusions about why this technology was created, what it was for. It is for command and control. Okay. Paul Barron, who is the guy who pulled a lot of this together. Okay. It didn't originate with him. I mentioned names like Licklider, etc.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think importantly, so I'm looking for another one, which I think is important. I think importantly, um, the the marketing or the imagination of scientists and people engaging with the technology is very different from this. And this was never classified. This was not classified. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You can get hold of this from the Rand Corporation quite easily.
That's the thing with the Rand Corporation. Sooner or later, it's all made public, and when you quote them, people still find the goal to deny it.
Yeah. And then another one is, I think is quite important. This is online. Which I think people
Let me see the history of ARPANET. Absolutely, the history of ARPA. Reading up in the the history of ARPA leading up to the ARPANET. Yes.
Okay. And I'll also, some of the papers by Licklider are really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this one, if you look for it, it's available online. It's by a guy called Michael Hauben.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is a technology of command and control,
Yes.
right? That has other uses, but always remained under the logic of command and control.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And of course, the marketing of the internet never really has mentioned that. Okay.
That's it.
And did not need to. Okay. As you know, the what was caveat emptor, which is the like buyer beware. And I think that the imagination that we have, that there are people who will always have our best interest at heart on the matters that we do not understand, um,
It's
has
naive,
been proven to be naive.
extremely naive. But
Right?
for
And that
some
naive,
reason, sorry.
no, and I think that naivete for especially for the politically aware and the activist is not something that is dangerous, I would say. Okay, so I don't expect our governments to have my best interest at heart. I I expect them to have the best interest of heart at heart of the state itself and a hierarchy of the interests that influence it, including my vote.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a hierarchy of interests, and which include my vote. But since my vote only will come every 5 years, um, and when I complain or when the media stirs me up, then I'm not really in control of that relationship. So then you have to
Yes.
ask who is in control of the relationship with the state, because those are going to be sustained
Mm-hmm.
and those are going to be more influential.
Mm-hmm.
So I think once you do that, you end up arriving at corporate groups, um, because we live in a capitalist society, so corporations that dominate, um, and and their interests will dominate, and so what you get is like politicians aren't the ones who do the kind of research for their policies. They have to depend upon academics and think tanks. So often politicians literally lift um, the policy from those types of documents and from those types of organization. They lift them into the policy, right? Sometimes word for word, right? Sometimes it's just a copy and paste. So, if you read the documents, you see that, and then a good edit. And so what we really have to understand that is the terrain that we're playing with. And so when we're talking about our freedoms and our democracy and our influence over this kind of corporate machine, for the state, we have to really acknowledge the the the, the the experience of the taste of it, the kind of the textures of it. How does it work? What does it do? Okay, and we have to do that beyond some of the lovely ideas that we might have. What does it actually do? And I think that's it. I think if you do that, you start to see patterns. You start to um, one of the things is that one of the things about organizations and power is that it's very hard to keep multi-generational unity amongst groups. So, like, we have these ideas of this group has been ruling us for thousands of years. If you say that, you haven't observed power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, power, the nature of power means that at some point you're going to fight over the same prizes.
This reminds me a little bit of a reading of Hegel,
Mm.
of the world spirit that travels and lands here and lands there, and ultimately, I think if one replaces that Hegelian notion of world spirit,
Mm-hmm.
it it um it gels well with the notion of power that you're speaking of here, because of course different groups compete for unbridled executive power, in many different forms and in many different locations across space and time. And it has a lot to do with access to resources and creation of new types of resources. And there's something almost mystified about how population is a resource for the powerful, how population can be drawn upon as a resource in the competition with others for power. Yeah.
But I think that was born with the idea of the state, which is sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because in the times of kings ruled the place, etc. And God was sovereign, lent sovereignty to human beings,
Mm-hmm.
and so the human beings really didn't belong to you. You know, even when you said "my lord,"
Yeah.
right? The human being themselves belonged to God.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened with the arrival of the sovereign state
Yeah.
were two things. One was the collapse of the centrality of God, as Nietzsche said, God is dead,
Mm.
right? In that sense, that the organization of human activity or European human activity around the around God and a sense of religion had ended, and that had gone to the market. Nietzsche is very clear,
Mm.
right? That had been, yeah. And uh, um, so what we're talking, what we're seeing, what we're but really talking about is that the human being, for the state, with statistics, it's in the calculation of its relative strength, whether you could go to war with this one, what would your economy produce, etc. With the emergence of that kind of logic,
Yeah.
then we became a resource. And then with the emergence of the logic that you could have a central bank and that the central bank could lend to the government, uh, in which the government then finance its present spending based upon um, the future servicing of debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we became that which is mortgaged for that spending, because especially when the spending uh, exceeded what the tax base could produce
Mm-hmm.
for major infrastructural projects, etc. And so once that happened, we were reduced to a resource. I mean, these these events made ontological changes to the way that the human being is seen, right? When we say that we are part of a population, what we have to recognize is that it we have then we have already ontologically identified ourselves as a unit, right?
Yes.
And whereas before, I wasn't part of a population. I'm from this tribe or whatever, right? Um, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So it is no longer an identity based upon relationality. This is now an identity based upon your your atomized relation, identity, right? As the one individual who can imagine themselves um, autonomous from the others, right? In that relation, in imagination of relationality, you could not imagine yourself like that at all, right? So when in Southern Africa, when they talk about Ubuntu,
Mm-hmm.
right? I am because you are,
Yes.
right? That is still that is the survival of a sense of self, which is related to that relationality, and which um, the the modern state-centered capitalist machine
Mm-hmm.
must necessarily destroy.
Yes.
It must necessarily, in order for you to become that unit resource, it has to destroy that, right? And this is not in a sense that it must plan your destruction. It's that it needs to control your relationality. It needs to set up a new structure of relationality in order that it can live.
Yes.
Yeah,
This
that's it. Hmm.
reminds me of a 1983 paper by Foucault, I think, The Subject and Power,
Yes,
which
exactly.
Right. It's sort of, you're taking me back to that
And I
thing. It's
and I was and that's and actually that's what I was translating.
oh, okay,
In
okay.
my head, I was relating it to Foucault and and trying to make sure I translated it into language that is,
Mm-hmm,
clear.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yes. And there's a certain degree of disappointment, which we were talking about it off air, that I think there's a certain degree of disappointment which, structural acuity notwithstanding, because if I look at my life, for example, it's gone through phases. There's a phase of just being alive and living and walking through life, going to school and enrolling in some subject to study and gaining some insights to pass tests, and then gradually sort of beginning to understand, hold on, what is that? They say I should look here, but what is that? What's going on over there? Oh, they never said anything about this in class. What is with
Hmm.
Operation Northwoods? What is that? Operation Paperclip? What is that? And so on and so forth. And then you begin realizing that there are layers of narratives, layers of consciousness and awareness of the v- the visibility of power, the
Hmm.
visibility and the literacy, power literacy. There are many degrees of power literacy. And in this context, let me just throw in something that I think many have realized, but perhaps you can help us put it better into words. It is that in the last 2 years,
Hmm.
the Pax Americana, the layers within which different people had a different level of consciousness of how bad uh, uh, the relation between humans and states and governments was, different layers of awareness. Right now, for example, this is a bit of a deviation, but I'll get back to my key point. Right now, many people are speaking of the crisis in which the US finds itself in the following terms. Well, for liberals, especially white liberals, you are now only becoming aware of what the Native Americans and the Africans, African descendants, or the descendants of the African American enslaved, of the Africans that were enslaved into the Americas. You are only now becoming aware of how bad it has been for us in the mainstream. But this is 40 million people, so it's not a rivulet. Even if it's not the mainstream, it's 40 million people. That's the population the size of an average African country, the black minority in the United States in America. So the discourse has now become sort of matter of factish. Well, you should have known in the last 40 years, 50 years that uh, what the mainstream claimed to be a liberal society, progressive society with human rights, etc., was all a bluff. Well, that's not been my experience, that people were aware of this before now the imperial boomerang has returned in the shape of Trump and his acolytes. That's for one. The other thing that I'm observing is that the Pax Americana and the liberal world order, the rules based world order, is crumbling in many ways, but that crumbling has been accelerated by the actions of the supremacists in charge in the garrison state in West Asia, that is Israel. The US garrison state, that is Israel in West Asia. The supremacists in power there have accelerated the upheaval of the dispensation that we grew up in. There is something new coming, and in this transitional phase, what is it? The old order is dying, now is the time of monstrosities. This is what we're seeing now. There is a new order coming, accelerated by the choices and decisions made against human rights, whatever their standing may have been before that, and against sort of elevating and uplifting the the rights of the fragile creature that we are as human beings.
Um,
It was a bit
I,
much, but
no. I agree with with much of what you said.
Mm.
There's just one thing I would like to kind of comment on
Mm.
is that when we say that there is a new world coming,
Mm-hmm.
then we have to ask ourselves, where is our agency in that? Because is a new world coming, or are we part of forging a new world? And I think this is very important because, um, like Hegel's, world spirit,
Mm.
it's almost like there is there is a force in the world
Mm-hmm.
which is separate to us, which blows through us, and in a sense, we do not realize that we did not have agency. We thought we did. Okay.
We thought we did.
Yeah, and I both acknowledge that that is true and not true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I give you an example. My teacher taught me that, um, and this is in my Islam, that when about the last days, right? Kind of eschatological vision. He said, look, when you act correctly and compassionately, you push it away. And when you don't, you bring it close. Okay. So in it was a balance between that sense of of the force of the world itself and the necessity of my agency. And I think that part of the problem of our time is that we've been unable to reconcile these two things. One is that, yes, there are these forces. Well, but what about our agency? And part of the problem is that in the discussion of that, we talk about individual agency. When you're talking about um, the political isn't isn't individual. The political is always relational, right? So when we're talking about agency for the political, we're talking about communitarian agency, collective agency, family agency. Okay, and individuals make decisions, but those decisions are made within a a a a framework. Is it Grundschaft in German?
Sorry, framework you said is
Yeah, in German.
Rahmen.
Uh,
Rahmenbedingung.
yeah. So within that, within a framework, right, of relationality.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're talking about your individual rights, which and you can and we have individual rights, that is not a politically defensible image of imagination of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Within you have your individual, but you have to remember that that power is mediated by people welding together and leveraging, either some type of relationality. And with that, there is no there is no politics. So the act of taking a slip and putting it in a ballot box as an utterly right the political act, right, is like the Mamdani Act, in which you organized around a hope, a vision of a hope in the future. This is what we can do, right? That's what Mamdani did, and he just proved against all of the fear mongering that ultimately, if you focus on, because what did he what did he focus on? Transport, and people need to have an affordable place to live. That's it, right? They could talk about communism, whatever. That's the two things. This is what he spoke about. This is what New Yorkers need, and that was masterful, right? Didn't get distracted from and built actually built a movement, right, of relationality to get that, to get himself put in place in order to do that. Now the question is whether he can maintain that um, movement of relationality. He can maintain it and then convert it into something that can produce the outcomes that he promised. And that's always a test, right?
Yes.
Then you come up against the structuring and the relationality that the institutions impose. And so that for the political, in this context, you have to also understand and master how do you manipulate those in order to fulfill what you need. Right? But you have to come back to this sense, this balance between the inexorable movement of history and your individual choice, and yeah, and I saw that Yusuf made a prayer for my teacher. May Allah sanctify his secret. Yes, may Allah sanctify his secret.
So, hold on. We have Salim in the comment section saying, when we view mankind as God views, then the curse of indoctrination eludes you. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, that's Salim. She'll have to
Yes.
elaborate on that. Yeah.
And so this is the point that sort of animates me in this conversation today is the fact that human beings are being treated at large in our masses, and I'm talking about millions, not as an end, but as a means. Something which Western philosophy, in the person of Kant, sort of identified and defined as the summum malum, the ultimate wrong, which is to treat human beings not as an end, but as a means towards ends of private nature, of reflexive, self-utilitarian nature.
Yeah, but even for Kant, it was okay for those. You just have to read Kant on black people and Slavs.
He did it to himself. He did it to himself. You see, this is
no. But here's what I'm going. I'm not canceling Kant.
No, but he did it to himself.
I'm just giving. I'm giving Kant context, right? So there's what Kant speaks, and what he what he omits and commits, right?
But Alex, look at these two uppity Negroes here, recently arrived at their status of equality with the Kants and the people of his.
No, I'm not. I'm not equal to them. I'm me.
It's thank you for pointing thank you, because this has always been my issue with Kant and many others of Western Enlightenment, is that as you read them, you agree until you get to the point, including Marx, where they talk about us and those that they've colonized, etc., and you realize, oh, we weren't supposed to be part of, the fruits of their progress. We weren't supposed to be beneficiaries of all of these eloquent elaborations about human nature, the human spirit, and that which is human. But here we are. It's 2025, and it's kind of we've Kant. So I read Kant and give him grace in things where he himself he himself would not have even conceived of being worthy of such grace, to put it in
Well,
these terms.
you know what my attitude is
Mm.
with that? I'm not responsible for making sense of your stupidity,
Voilà. That's
right?
it.
Right? Everybody has an asshole, so it's going to show up somewhere, mine included.
But but this is the whole thing. This is the whole thing.
No,
But when it comes,
and this is really important, right?
yeah.
Just one moment,
Mm.
because one of the things you see is that I've been really into to World War I and World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In fact, I went through I just went. I mean, I've been just vociferously, on World War II. I just covered all of the sea battles and the movement of resources across in the world wars between different armies, right, or different navies, armies, whatever. Okay, so and one of the features I see is that, especially for Black Americans, was proving that they were equal to a white American. And this boy growing up from the Amazon, so I was scratching my head because I I, I never felt that I had to justify to prove to anybody my humanity, right? I not. I mean, I never. But then I became aware as I grew up that that was part of the narrative of many people. That was going, why did you do? I don't need to prove anything to them, right? And so they died in disproportionate numbers, to prove themselves. And I think that that's something you can't prove. You have to really have done that work on about with yourself about your humanness
Mm-hmm.
and what you will accept. But then you're going to be dealing with a machine that needs to control your relationality for its profit,
Mm.
right? And so it requires you to accept when I talk about fractal identities, your position within that. And I don't know how I got how that missed me, but it did,
Mm-hmm.
thank God. But yeah, so I think that is the thing. Because you can never prove it. And they didn't. When they fought as they did, many of them, okay, eventually, so oh, no, we should give them this cross or the or Purple Heart or whatever. We should give that to them eventually, right? But when they did Operation Paperclip, they took Germans who they just been fighting and gave them rights beyond the people that they depended upon to defeat them, right? Black Americans went back to segregation. The GI Bill wasn't for them. They didn't help them to buy their houses, and so I think we have to, and the whole idea is that if we keep struggling, the whole idea people go, if you keep struggling, right? Because I've never really included myself in that. Yeah, if you keep struggling, then eventually it's going to happen. You're going to be accepted. It's going to change, right? If anybody who is benefiting from that kind of disparity is very unlikely to make those kind of changes, right? And so you just have to go your own way, right? You have to go your own way, build your own things, and tell them what they think. I have had, that I have my own office, I have my own business, right? And so when people behave as they inevitably will do, I just disengage. And I can disengage because I can afford to disengage. Right? So what you end up with but once you remain within that um technology of relationality, then it has to be able to tell you who you are. That's the point. It must be able to tell you who you are. It must be able to give you an identity, right? It even including what kind of music a type of person like you should listen to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How you should speak, clothes you should wear, right? And yeah, well, for me, that's not. I'm not basing it on my identity upon that. I can't do that.
This is such an interesting aspect of the conversation where, in terms of resistance to imperial overreach and the penetration of imperial standards into society, where, and it's a very, very hard sell, I realize that in many contexts, where the LGBTQ alphabet sort of uh, denomination of those groups in human society that are now organized to a certain degree and are claiming or reclaiming their full
Mm-hmm.
full human rights, sort of reclaiming that against the discrimination of the past decades, if not centuries, if not millennia, against their particular grain of identity. I've realized that none are as courageous as people who choose, against the increased number of assassinations, let us say in the US, something that I came across, of people who express their trans identity or their homosexuality. There's an incredible number of assassinations of these people because of that particular expression of their identity. I sort of realize that the nowhere do you see a courage as explicit as in these communities to live according to who they auto define themselves as, against the zeitgeist.
I okay. I would.
It's an interesting
No, no, no.
domain.
It's no, no, no. I don't. There's been a. They have battled. Okay, but I'm gonna go back. You read about COINTELPRO.
Hold on, come back, come back.
Did you read about COINTELPRO?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What do you read about COINTELPRO? The FBI,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the Ku Klux Klan with Black Americans. If
Mm-hmm.
you're not talking about the American context, right? You're not talking about the African context,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the American context, which dominates our imagination of the political, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
notice that I often ignore it, right?
Even of the aesthetic.
Yeah, and and you put up the Emmett Till
Mm-hmm.
lynching.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that movement came up against in order to do what it did, right? Black people couldn't even go on the black people couldn't drink water from the same place as a white person. They couldn't go to the toilet in the same place as a white person. They couldn't go they had to go to the back of the bus. They were fighting the Second World War. That was their situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And now, in terms of the Splinternet, right, and the death of globalization, the
Yes.
United States was able to sell its idea of itself against in it's so that you deny what you see with your eyes, right, and confirm an imagination that they present. It's a dream machine. It's a dream machine that allows you to deny what's in front of your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that there is no situation in that one, right? Like the hold on, like that which had to be confronted by the African Americans who were property, right? That's what they brought themselves out of, and they brought themselves out of that by utter struggle, and always, when they fought in the Civil War for their freedom, they didn't receive what they were promised, and the state doubled down to put them back in their place. Right? Right now, what we're seeing is that the state is doubling down to put the kind of infrastructure in place to put them back in their place. Right? That's what DI is about. Okay? So, with the American situation, you really have to battle against that dream machine that in which you're looking at the world, right? And the dream machine is manufacturing what you see against what you see. Right? This is like the Orwellian doublespeak. You know it's not, but it is. Right? And just just finish it, just to hammer it in. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, two sides of the political spectrum, both assassinated. They're not the only ones.
Mm-hmm.
Right? COINTELPRO was and the selling of drugs to Black Americans in their communities to destroy their communities as a political act. Yeah, literally as a political act. Oliver North, just go, if anybody remembers Oliver North, go look at that. The Contra affair, the Iran Contra affair. Go look at it. Go look it up. If you weren't alive at that time and having to read it at the point I was, I'm still 35, but yeah, um, yeah, the so yes, so now what you have, I just is that every movement beyond after that has had to build upon that space then, right? And 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 um and the other thing is that I even question the narrative of human rights, right? I question a state has no right to tell me what my rights are, right? It has no right to tell me what my rights are because my people, we had to win our rights, right? Sometimes some branches of my family had to escape from the plantations and go fight in the interior, etc. In the to live free. We claimed our rights, and no state, including the post-colonial one, is going to decide what my rights are. without a fight. Right, not giving it up. No, those are, this is. But you have to understand that that is the discourse of the state. The discourse of the modern state is precisely that, and so that, um, especially socialist governments, often destroyed black bourgeois wealth and infrastructure in order to build the state. And then subsequent generations complain that there's not a black bourgeois, right? That there's no industrial development. Well, you know, and this is precisely that. Because if it had been based within the tribe, so why are you touching my people, right? The state come, if it wants to do that, it has to fight, right? So that you have to understand that the modern state is based upon the monopolization of violence, and it is an order. So this is a global order, and what we right of how nation and government works. And what has happened at this point is that it is no longer working in the format that it was for the West, right? We're now at the point, and so it's being reimagined. And part of that is that people are going. When Trump says "Make America Great Again," and you get these people who are going, yeah, well, they want to go back to a period in which they feel that it was great.
Which coincidentally is the Redeemer phase of U.S. history, which sort of gave birth to the
You need to you need to open that one out, because most people don't know what that is.
This is so I just noticed from the comments from Anna, you're right. The moment I said alphabet group, I felt awkward about that. I've never really consciously used that expression, and so kind of I realized, hey, that's a way that usually it's used in a derogatory way. I didn't intend to use it that way, so thanks for
Yeah.
pointing that out. That it did feel that way, and for you to point it out, it actually means that I'm not the only one who sees it that way. So maybe I shouldn't speak that way about it. With that said, the Redeemer movement, the redemption movement, is something I was shocked to connect with the current, you know, politics of the U.S. with Trump's the second presidency, where it's blatant. Everybody knew in Trump's first presidency, hey, this guy is quite. Yes, please.
What's the Redeemer movement? You need to tell people what the Redeemer thing is.
Exactly. So the Redeemer
Historically.
movement. So what happened is in the U.S. after emancipation, right after emancipation, the Southerners who lost their power, who lost access to income capability by losing their slaves, had to be put in check by a federal military unit that was positioned and stationed in the South. Now, I wish I remembered which regiment it was. I can look it up in a minute. But there was a regiment stationed in the South, which had as a function to guarantee the equal rights now accrued to former enslaved African American people. Because the losers of the war refused it. They were embittered and refused to accept that their former enslaved now, and this is the very interesting aspect of it, who had the knowledge and the know-how of handicraft, of craftsmanship, because they were the slaves, the enslaved for generations. So you had in the society and community of the enslaved people who had passed down knowledge of craftsmanship, whereas the community of the enslavers didn't have this applied knowledge of how to woodwork, of how to iron melt, of how to not just picking cotton in the fields. And so what happened is that there was a rapid enrichment of the liberated, formerly enslaved, because of their ingenuity in business building and craftsmanship, and a rapid impoverishment or relative impoverishment of the formerly ownership class. And among these people, then groups, militant white reactionary groups were built that valued their former wealth uh, above the Union, that valued their former wealth above the Union. Slaves were liberated in order to maintain the Union, because then you suddenly had a population in the South that could bear arms against their former owners. So divide and rule, divide et impera, was used by the North in the South by dividing and undoing the master and slave relationship that existed in the South by empowering the slaves against the masters. All of these things led to militant groups in the South. Just two more sentences. Now calling themselves the Redeemers, to bring back the hierarchy, the natural God given order of whites above blacks that was before the Union's emancipation
Yeah.
successes.
And,
The
and
Redeemers.
and okay, I just wanted to say that those emancipatory narratives
Hmm.
at that point were the narratives of the Republicans,
You see?
and that the narratives of putting black people in their place, etc., were the narratives of the Democrats at that point. Just wanted
And,
to say that. Yeah, I'm
and
going to step back again. Please continue. No, this is fascinating. So now make your point. Now that people understand what the Redeemer thing is, right?
so so the shocking or the juicy historical piece of information is that I think in the 1890s you suddenly had very, very wealthy black business families, businessmen, businesswomen, very wealthy, suddenly right out of slavery into wealth within a decade.
Mm-hmm.
And stagnating, if not declining, wealth for formerly wealthy white families because
Mm-hmm.
of this, the upheaval of the means of relational power in those societies. And these white men, and this is where that little sentence always comes in, and it's just I have to chuckle, where these white men in the hoods, the Ku Klux Klan members, the Catholics, etc., whose wives were knitting the pointy hoods. You see, this is where that little statement comes in. Yes, it was men in the hoods, but it was the wives knitting the hoods, and the mothers and the aunties. Um, these societies, this society then claimed to have the right to redeem and to bring about redemption, which was to reinstate the the hierarchical classification of human beings. The white Christians had to be on top, and the syphilis imbued Negro had to be at the bottom. And this was how it was supposed to be, and that had to be redeemed. Trump is a redeemer. Sorry.
Okay. And to do that, violence and the destruction of black property and communities
Mm.
was pursued. And once they got them in their place, then they bound them down under Jim Crow, right?
Let
But
me
they burned, flooded, firebombed, shot whole communities. They massacred whole communities that had become wealthy, etc. Then there's a scandal of the Freedmen's Bank. So when Black Americans are talking about their situation as if it was perpetually as it is, right? I always kind of scratch my head. You know, you really need to look at that history and understand that, and that. has also inspired a lot of my understanding of fractal identities.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the amount of violence that had to be unleashed in order to manage that population. At the same time, they were promoting European immigration into the United States to manage the demographics. They were not permitting non-whites to immigrate to the United States at that point, right? So we're talking about late 19th century, so late 1800s, early 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, and even Christian Arabs had to have it reviewed so that they could be classified as Caucasian in order to be able to enter and stay in the United States.
Yes.
Okay. So all of these demographic forces, right? And in addition to that, what they were the creation of things like loans, etc., and grants and training programs that only First World War, um, the Harlem Hellfighters,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right, who were a regiment which the Americans formed up, but would not allow to fight on their side, then they were trained they fought on the side of the French, right, and innovated and made tactical innovations to warfare, strategic innovations, yeah.
So
Mhm.
I have the exact terminology in front of me now for redemption, not the narrative that I shared, but the exact terminology from history. In US history, redemption refers to the late 19th century movement where white Southern Democrats, as you pointed out, regained political power and overturned the policies of the Reconstruction era. So there's a juxtaposition between Reconstruction after emancipation and redemption after Reconstruction. These redeemers sought to restore white supremacy and dismantle the progress made by African Americans after the Civil War through violence, intimidation, and discriminatory laws. This movement ended the federal oversight in the South and established the foundation for Jim Crow segregation. And there are 6 or 7 terms here that really clarified. There was a political takeover by these white people, white Democrats, to reclaim state governments from the Republican Party. It was the end of Reconstruction, so there was no more tolerance for the Compromise of 1877, um, because federal troops were removed from the South. And this is the point where Reconstruction is said to have ended, when military protection of African American ended because of uh, uh, um, majority politics in Congress.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm saying it at the same time because like Hoffman, Flexner report, all of that, that's
Yes.
happening around this period, right?
Absolutely. The structural sort of reinforcement of uh, um, the discriminatory hierarchy. It was structurally and legally reinforced
Yeah, but also the the
across
the
sectors.
im you're talking about the import of to demographically change the balance, right?
Yes.
You're importing people, right? You're cementing certain types of ideas, right? Hoffman's position was that, and yeah, Hoffman's position was that, where he did his statistical analysis and came to the conclusion that if you denied healthcare healthcare, in short, if you denied healthcare to blacks, they would naturally die out, right? Because
I
so
just
there were
went to look
all these
up some.
imaginations. Yeah, go on.
I just went to look up something. Look at what I just looked up. Frederick Trump, Donald Trump's grandfather. He was born in
Hmm.
Karlstadt, which was in
Hmm.
Bavaria. He
Hmm.
immigrated to the United States in the year 1885.
Yeah.
In 1891, he began speculating in real estate, etc., etc. The grandson is still in real estate, and the grandson says, let's make America great again, to the time when his pater familias, where the father and founder of the Trump dynasty, migrated to the US.
Yeah.
Which is exactly in that time of redemption.
Yes. So, and then you get Woodrow Wilson. But here's what's interesting. So, with the American Dream Machine, they're bringing freedom to the world on this foundation. So when they go to places like, after the Second World War, their relationship with Africa was based upon precisely this. They're talking about freedom, but they're rebuilding, or they're enforcing that same, and that same framework, right? And so, it's like when the uranium for the bomb was taken out of Congo, right? Congo mine. I can't remember the name of it right now. But yeah, and that mine is now depleted, right? But the Congolese didn't benefit from that. This is exactly the same imagination. And so, if you want to understand what has lost the United States its absolute hegemony, it is precisely this. It is their inability. I always say that a nation is destroyed on the topology of its sins.
Yes.
Right. It's precisely that is what has destroyed them. Right. And at the point that it is happening, they're doubling down on it. Right? Because their imagination is that is what has given them strength, but it is not a sustainable one. They needed to deal with their issues, and they have not. Right. Salim is saying that he made his money with a okay, and okay, with a whorehouse. Yeah. Well, okay, I'm good. Yeah, because also the next thing I would go is that, you know in the communities I grew up in, or the ones I inherited, well, people were people, right? And even the person who was crazy had their rights. You had a right to feed them and look after them. They could wander. You would you know and so on. And this and so um the people that you would term the LGBTQ people now are, in our society, in our, I'm not talking about our traditional societies in the countryside, right? I can't hear you.
No, I'm listening
It
to
wasn't
you.
that it wasn't that they had rights. They were people, right? They are people, and it is this sense of the humanity of the person, right? And you cannot legislate that humanity. That is something people have to. So what you'll notice is the penchant for dehumanization, right? There's a penchant in our civilization to dehumanize others in order to dominate and manipulate them. And that and it's really important that nobody can give you your humanity. And I think that's what a lot of that's what you have to nobody can, because it's not this to give, it is yours. It is you can't give to somebody what they already have. Yeah. Well, absolute power. Well, there's never any absolute power, Salim. That's the reality, right? So the pursuit of the illusion of absolute power is what corrupts. because power is always based upon that relationality. So the whole thing about it is the anxiety about the power relations inherent in the relationality is where people overreach and commit the kinds of corruption and atrocities that in which they are trying to, and which they cannot. So once they commit to that, they cannot stop because they have what is that anxiety will not go away because nobody has absolute power. Not possible, right? The like in Japan and the samurai. The samurai needed the people who were who were planting the rice and the food. Without that, so their imagination of power. Once people became despondent, then their their basic fiefdoms just they became impoverished and collapsed. And then people would also run away to religious orders, right? So what you realize is that it's it is we create these and this is why I went the axiom of psychopolitics. People then it is these fantasies that we create about the nature of our power, and in which we have to try and hide the nature of the relationality upon which they are built. Yes, yes. I haven't read that work. Yusuf, the Recep Centurk. I haven't read that. Yeah. I think
I've
I
been
managed.
I've been nodding along all along, and I've been thinking, just from my biography, from my experience, I've met many human beings of many different nationalities and ethnic identities. And I've noticed just simply that this sentiment that my humanity is a birth given, I don't necessarily have to go all the way to their reflection about where it comes from, whether it's from God or ethnic identity, but it appears in different intensities in different peoples.
Mm.
There are people who have this sentiment of, for the strongest expression of this I have ever met in my life is with uh, uh, people from Guinea, Conakry, and from Mali and Burkina Faso. The sense that, can't you see that I am a human being? Can't you see? Who do you think you are? you know, the,
Yeah,
the
my thing is that if you can't see what I am,
yeah,
then for
it's
me it's
your
like
problem,
yeah, and there's something
right?
so it's not
But
right with you,
you see that,
right?
but the affirmative the affirmative, what's the word I'm looking for? It'll come to me. But the affirmative stands for that. Whether it's active in a human being or whether it's just sort of, hold on, whether you have to provoke a person or whether you have to degrade a person before it becomes active in them in a sense of resistance. Oh, hold on. I don't see why you would do this to me. It's very different from a person who steps in the door
Mm.
claiming for themselves, hold on a second, ladies and gentlemen, here comes a human being. I have the feeling that the people that I've met of different origins have a different sort of degree of assertiveness of that sentiment you speak of. The
Yeah,
intensity of that sentiment varies depending on where you're from or who you're
yeah,
from.
yes. And um, some people would tell you that you're arrogant, which
Yes.
I'm often accused of being, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, too bad. Um, the point, the I think the point here is that look, I'm not resisting. I'm not resisting how you see. You don't define me.
That's it.
I'm me. I'm putting boundaries on what you can do with me,
That's it.
right? And if you want to cross some of them, then if you want to cross some of them, then I prefer to let us see who will die, because I'm not accepting it.
That's and that understanding I find is unequally distributed, because I'll give an example, and maybe you can sort of have a look at that example. I picked it up years ago while reading that the conquistadores, when they arrived in Latin America and started doing what they were doing and enslaving left and right and killing left and right and murdering left and right, and then they discovered the silver mines, and then they started putting the locals to enslaved labor in the mines. And the story is told, I think I've picked up two narratives, that it is sort of an a, a myth, and I've also picked up that it is a documented piece of history, event in history, is that one particular ethnic group chose to mobilize and collectively jump off a cliff for the promise of the afterlife in their mythology, in their narrative of what the afterlife promises, was more acceptable, more amenable than the life that they were living under the new colonial
Well,
dispensation.
well,
Just a second. So they
uh
collectively jumped off a cliff. I'd rather die than live under these conditions.
well. Um, when I was child,
Mm,
sitting with my grandmother,
mm.
she would say, "Well, if you're going to do that, then take one of them with you. If they're the ones doing it, and you're going to do that, then you have to take one of them with you, right?"
Your
So,
grandmother said that when you were a child.
yeah, yeah.
I picked it up as an older teenager.
Say no, no, no. And the other one was that, no, if that's how they want to behave, and that's what they want to do, and you have to go,
Mm,
then somebody come in with you, right?
yeah,
And if you
I've
could take
picked it up. Yeah.
better to take a few,
Mm-hmm,
right? If that's what you want to do,
mm-hmm.
right, and you choose that, then, and I have to go, then come, let's go. Okay. Um, but the other one is that the other thing that I really was taught was that you must honor the humanity of the next person, right? And I'm not saying that I was a saint. I mean, I'm anything but it. But yeah, you must honor the humanity of the other person,
Mm-hmm.
right? They need food too, right? They need
Yes.
they need life too. Um, and what I really saw the difference between like that generation and the generation who afterwards who were coming back to build the nation according to what they had learned at the universities.
Mm, mm.
That brought a very different way of being. Right? Um, it was like coming and facing the kind of racism that you face in Europe and the United States. I was thought, well, no, it's all right if they come in a group to deal with you. That's fine. Choose one,
Choose one.
right? Choose one
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that that one pays for everything they are going to do to you.
Mm,
Okay, that's how I was educated, right?
mm,
And I was educated, uh, um, and I think it's really important because you're, you know, no policeman is going to give you your humanity. They cannot give that to you. I mean, what you can do is you can get justice.
Mm-hmm.
But at the point that people come to act like that with you, you have to, you're if you do not possess a sense of your own humanity, then then there is a chance that you will accept that it's almost as if they have a right to do that to you. Yeah,
And this is where this is essentially where what you're saying connects to Frantz Fanon's philosophy, or not philosophy, his politics. But his politics are also inspired by his insights from psychoanalysis, from the practice of having patients in Algeria, where his conclusion then was, it looks as though there is a point of dehumanization that affects my patients to such a degree that the cause of their dehumanization must be fought at the root. And the cause of their dehumanization is the unbridled, brutal violence that the French colonial regime is imposing on them. And I paraphrase, but then he says, my observation is here that the only way that these now broken shadows of themselves, these men in my patients, that are my patients, in my yard, that are stuttering, that are stammering, that are stumbling through the day, that have lost themselves in their identity, the only cathartic way I see to reestablish their full humanity is by them reclaiming that which was taken from them, which is their identity, through their language, through their customs, and if necessary, through physical fight of those that oppress them, hit them, maim them with the butt of their guns, and cut them and slice them and murdered their families in front of their eyes with the bayonet. These are humans who have been rendered shallow shadows of what they were because they didn't resist physiologically against the physiological destruction of their identity.
And so what happened? And Aaron Naima was asking some questions in the
Mm.
in the comments, and I think it's 11:30, so I have to wind up.
Mm.
Okay, so she was saying, well, how was the present situation of the state of African Americans manufactured?
Mm.
Right. So first of all, the United States has a black middle class that has managed to survive much of this with wealth and infrastructure intact.
To discriminate them.
Right? It is one of the things that is one of the problems is that it's also dominated by a sense of proving itself. And some people are not like that. I know that. Okay. But what happened is that Jim Crow was about about, apartheid means separate development.
Yes.
Jim Crow was about separate development. But not only separate development, but appropriate development.
Can I throw in a small detail? There's this number that never leaves my mind, that the United States has a 15% population of African American, that in total, that's 40 million people, that in total possess less than half of 1% of the entire wealth of the United States in America.
Yes. And so what happened is that the social, economic, educational, and cultural means for that production had to be established. And that was established by violence and by economic, there was things like peonage, was debt slavery, etc. There were things which were established to manufacture that,
Mm-hmm.
right? The prison complex, and when people migrated to the urban centers in which they needed jobs, okay, that was again worked. What's her name? Parsons, Elizabeth Parsons. There's a work of an American anarchist called, I think her name is Parsons.
Parsons, like the leading sociologist.
Yeah, Elizabeth Parsons, I think her name is Parsons, the
Mm-hmm.
anarchist,
Mm-hmm.
American anarchist. I think reading her work would be really helpful.
Let me have a look.
Lucy Parsons.
Lucy Parsons. Okay. Oh yes, I see it. Lucy Parsons. Yes. 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 Yes.
Lucy E. Parsons. I think her second. Let me see if her second name is Elizabeth. Her
I
name
know
is
that
Lucy E.
picture.
Parsons.
Hold on.
Yeah. Yep. Lucy Parsons. Yeah, read Lucy Parsons' work. Chicago. She was from Chicago. When she died, the Chicago police seized her library, and it never they seized her library. They said she was more dangerous than a thousand rioters. Okay, so so what am I so that so in terms of even with the legal system, um because slavery is forbidden except for the incarcerated in the United States. So
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you have enough of a prisoner population for to continue the access to that um, cheap labor is part of the economy, right? The immigrant economy is part of that economy. The effect of slavery never ended because you spoiled the American capitalist. Yeah, so they require access to to a steady pool of black labor, and so the kinds of conditions that produce a pipeline that leads to the prison became so. So what I'm saying is that what you're dealing with is very deliberately designed. That's where I'm going. I'm gonna stop. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
this is not to provoke further the opening of a new chapter, but we are talking about um, the awareness and consciousness of one's humanity. We are talking about the acknowledgement and acceptance of one's humanity by other. And in the
Hmm.
shadows of that lurks another aspect for a conversation for another time, which is
Hmm.
under which circumstances does a society, does a culture, does a collective accept, not necessarily even legalize, but accept to dehumanize other humans of their own collective or of other collectives? Because that is a part of the human experience as well. And
Well,
yeah,
part of okay. The thing about it is that you see,
I'm
once
not
you remove
provoking a
God
new
from the equation,
conversation. Huh? I'm just.
no, no, no. If you once you remove God from the conversation, then it becomes other human beings who grant those rights to other human beings. But if you hold that that human being themselves is the creation of God, then you're not the one that decides it. You affirm the rights, right? Which means that you have to acknowledge your oppression,
Hmm.
right? But once you so and so what I'm saying here is that they are this person is a human being. There is no condition upon which your impingement upon their capacity to have food, to live, to be free of violence is not oppression. Okay? And the person you oppress has a right to fight, to fight and resist you. Right? Because you are the one oppressing them. Now, what is very interesting about the European, and I'm going to talk about my own experience. I'm not talking about something hypothetical, right? So, I live in a European dominated world. So the thing about the European is that when they're oppressing you, right, it is something that is going to be dealt with incrementally and has to be dealt with, and is morally wrong, and they shouldn't do that. But you have to understand. But you let me break his legs and do that, I'm going to prison, right? And so I've always understood that, right? And so the tradition of my people is we will fight to the death at the drop of a hat, right? You know that you cross that door with us, that you better be willing to go to the grave. And in that was a culture of you don't start it. Yeah? Don't start it. But we finish it. And that's also in the language, right? That's also in the language. You don't start it, but we'll finish it. You start it, we finish it. But but the point is that and the reason why I'm talking about this is that this is not something, this is about our collective humanity, right? White or black. Because there is something dehumanizing to you as a white man or white person when you have to do that to another person. You have to deny something about your own humanity. And this is one of the things that Frantz Fanon spoke about, how it affects them, right? Including the cultural sense amongst Europeans of a being almost divorced from the vital sense of their of humanity. You know, you talk about black music and this and that, right? That is the cost. That actually is the cost of doing that. Because if you go to traditional European folk traditions, right, their music is visceral, etc. Right, it moves you. But in order to do that, in order to tell yourself that you are more cultured than the savage, you have to create this art form that is completely cerebral, denies you access to your humanity, to that, to the full expression of the humanity. And so you have to, nobody does that. Okay, nobody can, because as human beings, we are relational. So what we have to recognize is that we have to concentrate upon the quality of that relationality. Okay. And so that at the point that, we have to concentrate on the quality of that relationality. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
The beautiful thing about what you've just said is that as much as I agree with you and I recognize in this conclusion, I stand on the same side as you, that essentially the human is a relational creature that is born from another creature and is raised among other creatures of its kind, and et cetera, et cetera. We are living in 2025 where there is a paradigm, the dominant paradigm of sociology taught in Western academia, especially in the UK, is the so-called methodological individualism school. The methodological individualism school, where precisely this statement, this matter-of-factish observation of how we are born and how we become, is negated and sort of subjugated to some statistical individuation obsession that is the foundation of what Thatcherism is and what Reaganism is and what essentially is neoliberalism. And Tony Blair is a fan of that. And the leading the head of the London School of Economics for many years, the sociologist of trust. The name doesn't come up now, but individual methodological individualism is the exact antithesis of what you've just voiced, and it is the dominant school of sociology in the United
Yeah,
Kingdom.
yeah. And so that's why I started doing a project like Dystopian Mass, in which you do so all of that kind of deep excavation,
Mhm,
because you have to bring the conversation to this point, right?
mhm.
This, if you're going to, and Robert Romano is here, and I'm going to say that his practical guide to building commons, right, which is from inspired, with part of the dystopia on mass community. You need to go and follow him. But it's that recognition that once you understand that humanity is about relationality,
Mhm.
then you must protect and build commons, right? It takes political form immediately,
Yes.
rather than having your individual wealth in a bank account. You have communitarian. You begin to understand communitarian wealth. Oh, Giddens. Okay.
Remember him?
I actually did not read his work.
Well, the Lord Giddens, I was
Hmm.
very displeased by the stuff I had to read by him, not because it was necessarily bad. It was quite, I find, full of cliches, and it was the essays that I read were really imbued with this methodological individualism thing, and I just couldn't believe that it has become the dominant strain of sociology in the UK as the basic assumption being that there are no, what does it Thatcher said, there is no society, only individuals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That is-
So I'm telling you that once you accept that relationality, you have to build commons, and you
Yes.
have to build and that begins to build politics based upon relationality.
Mm-hmm.
Politics based upon relationality is centered around the commons, and the most important commons, right? Because it always performs as a commons, is money, the nature of money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Anna is saying that in Switzerland and Germany, it's disabled people that are semi-forced into near enslaved labor. Yes, because once you do not have a society based upon that relationality, then you do not feel that you're obligated to take care of the weak, right? So
Oh
it is
Lord.
that.
It all comes full circle. What is it they've been saying? What is it Elon Musk has been saying? Empathy is for the weak.
Yes,
Empathy is for the weak. Empathy is oh yes, yes.
right, based upon that, because and that is and that kind of view is produced by the constitutive anxieties of that kind of ego, because once you maintain that ego based upon the disavowal, right, or the foreclosure of your relationality, and what it demands of you, then it becomes a zone, because it's real, it becomes a zone of anxiety. Yeah.
Then again, there
Yeah.
is something. I mean, this all of these points we're raising are chapters and conversations in and of themselves. But I'm
Hmm.
reminded of a conversation, a lecture that I attended years ago
Yeah.
about how to deal with. It was a training for people who are professionals in caregiving, caretaking for disabled of various
Hmm.
categories. And that lecture, at the core of that lecture I attended, the statement was, a good life is a life full of challenges met, not of challenges won, but of challenges met. And if that is so, uh, um, making sure that the disabled have a good life is to make sure that they expose themselves or are exposed to challenges of their own choosing. But removing challenges from the lives of people, including of the disabled, is to not allow them to fully meet the good life.
Okay. Let me tell you a story.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and this is for, and also in response to Anna.
This has puzzled me for years. It's still eating at me.
Okay. So I grew up in an area where there's a guy who was called John who'd gone abroad. He studied physics. He came back as crazy as hell, and lived when he was particularly affected. He would take his clothes off and run around the area. We would just avert our faces because he'd be, and his name was John. He would help us with our homework. He was a great mathematician, and um, and also we would carry him food or give him money to buy food. Okay, so he's part of our community. There are things that he can do and things he can't. So he contributes as he does. But when he was streaking, we didn't, and the children there, there wasn't moral outrage. We just looked away, right? And because he would finish whatever he'd gone through, you could understand that. So there was because there was still something surviving of that kind of communitarian sense. You could handle that. Once you hand that to the state, it is going to enter onto all of these kinds of rationalizations. No, but John was one of us, and something happened to him, and that did not make him not one of us. Okay, so he could eat, he could drink. He has to do those things like all human beings, and he had his and he had his and he made his contribution.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's
Mm.
important. I think you
I
have to
like the
understand
nuance. I
that
like the nuance that you're bringing
the
up.
people.
It's very
Yeah,
nuanced what you're saying. Very nuanced, and I just got it. You
no,
see,
please. Yeah, okay,
I just got it because
please,
you're saying
please.
meet them where their utility expresses through their engagement in the community.
John was not a utility to us.
Thanks for fixing that. Yes.
John was a member of our community.
Mm-hmm.
He was
Mm-hmm.
just a
Mm-hmm.
member of our community who had had some traumatic experiences, and something about him was broken. But in that, he brought what he brought. Like all of us contributed. So John would teach you. He could take you through your mathematics and so on, right? And you gave him food. Okay. To speak of his utility is to dehumanize him,
That's the point. That's exactly the point. That's
right?
exactly the. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you know, we called him Mad John.
And yet,
Well, yeah, he's mad, but we would sit sometimes on the bridge and chat, and he would always bring interesting well, in his saner moments, he would always bring um interesting observations, right? But then he had periods when he was absolutely crazy, and to manage it, he smoked a lot of weed.
mm,
Okay.
mm,
Um, yeah. And again, you just turn a blind eye, right? Because yeah, yes, Anna, Anurag, yeah, I mean Anurag. I think these are matters of traditional societies. Yeah, these are traditional societies which are still based on relationality. And once you cross into that zone where you're starting to talk about the utility and the person's a burden on the state and like who are you? Is this person,
Mm,
you know?
mm, mm. Very important points
Yeah,
that you raised there. Essentially,
yeah, yeah,
essential
yeah,
points.
yeah. But and Anna, it is that I mean I don't know I would be surprised if some people don't call me crazy, Anna. But the point is that what it was is that you recognized you had to see it forces you to see the person, the people, and to deal
Mm,
with that person as a person.
hmm.
Right? You can't assume that that person is yeah, people have different capacities.
This is really good. We've spoken about this, but not specifically. We've spoken about heterogeneity in the past
Mm.
and the narrowing of tolerance for the variety of heterogeneous expressions of our humanity is a
Yeah,
sign of the things that make living difficult, problematic.
but
It's
but
a sign of
but
fascism.
and also but also I even object to the word tolerance. It's
That
like
too. That yeah,
these
I
are
get it.
our people, they're our blood, these are ours. Right? We don't tolerate it's ours. If somebody comes and settles in our areas, right, and
Mm,
eats with us and drinks with us, and they're there for a year, they're a part of us, right?
mm.
So what happens is that you end up with these types of societies that cannot absorb people like that, right?
Say a few
Okay,
more
so
things about
does anybody
tolerance.
have the okay? I'm gonna share Robert Romano's. I'll share it as a I'll share it.
Alex.
And I already did. I shared it as a note on my thing. So if you go onto my
Mm-hmm.
Substack,
I've seen it.
it's a note. Okay. All right, guys. Well, we've actually done 2 hours.
It's just if you
Yeah.
could say
So be,
a few more words about tolerance, because there's much more behind that than what you've let on. Just a few more words about why you reacted so clearly and intensely to that word tolerance, because there's much more behind that.
bec- because because when you tolerate something, you accept that it is something that has to be tolerated,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, you're not accepting the thing as it is. Or the person as the person. You're tolerating them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know that human beings have difference, etc., you don't tolerate them. You either welcome them amongst you or you don't. So
Mm.
that the whole thing of toleration is that your welcome is conditional,
It's
right?
conditional, yes. Mm-hmm.
Conditional upon my tolerance of you,
Mm.
right? It assumes that one there is a central dominance that is correct, and you are a deviation. So I have to tolerate you as a deviation, right? No, that's not humanity. That's not humanity. That no.
You have a long way to go.
Yeah. Somebody was talking about somebody African guy was Zulu guy was complaining about Afrikaners, and so he was talking about a very. I said, look, what you have to understand is that another order came to that part of Southern Africa. If they had come and they had been and your order had been dominant, then they basically would have become some kind of Zulus, right?
Mm-hmm.
They would have mixed, they would have been absorbed into them, etc. And you would have accepted. Yeah, they look a bit different, but these are a part of us, right? But an order came that has a way of categorizing human beings in
Mm-hmm.
essentialist ways, and in order to control their access to resources.
Mm-hmm.
And so it requires identities that manufacture that. So it's not a civilization of welcome. Here we are, you can become part of us. No,
Mm.
it requires a caste system in order to to replicate its economic and political disparities. So
Mm.
intoleration keeps you in the space of a political disparity in which you're outside and you are tolerated by the mainstream.
Yes.
And so it is only inevitable at some point that because it's symbolically based upon tolerance, then
Mm-hmm.
there's a point at which you don't have to tolerate,
Mm.
right? But if these people become your people, it's like I am here in Britain, right? And here's the narrative: I can be British, but I can't be English. But I was born in England.
Yes.
I can. I'm this second generation of people from my people from England, right? Can't third, fourth generation can't be English, right? They
Mm.
can be British, but they can't be English. Why?
Mm.
Because to be English, you were if I was Polish, right, I would be English,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Second, third generation, yeah, I come from. No, but he's English, yeah, right?
Mm.
The discriminator of English, right, is this.
Mm.
That's the understanding of people, and so in that, so what you see is that it produces it is a civilization which is a caste civilization, right? It is based upon caste. But you could, with the disavowal of calling it that, and I think it's really important because again, coming because we really have not seriously addressed the splinternet and the death of globalism. But what we're seeing is that um, this way of relationality is coming up hard against its limits, and as it comes up hard against those limits, um, the necessary cohesion, etc., to face the challenges because we're living in the same place as generations. Those challenges will affect us all,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not meeting them we can't meet them as a unified group,
Mm.
right? We're meeting them, and we're meet with the no the challenges have arrived, and in response to the challenges, we launch ourselves into what are effectively the beginnings of civil war and and the tendencies of ethnic and demographic management in order to maintain the structure of race, etc., within those societies.
Yes.
So that it's almost as if for all of these years that we've been fighting without tolerating, right, comes to the point where you recognize that in a sense, that itself is bankrupt. Yeah.
Mhm.
And this conversation that we were having before about disability and difference is embedded in it, because again, it's a toleration. It is a basic problem of our cultural understanding of humanity and relationality.
Mm.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, please, guys, forgive me. I'm in this rest phase in which I'm really in a very. When I do that, I'm quite exploratory. So I've really just been exploring over the past, and as I rest, I think I'll continue to do that, and I think that I should continue to do that until December.
And we haven't even touched on the what you have in the backhand today in this industrial history and the path of globalization that the world was put on after World War II. We haven't even touched on what you've been working on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've been thinking about it and listening and reading and so on. So I don't think I've started working on it yet, but I got ideas. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Please forgive the way that we're wandering, and I think that's not. I'm not putting that on the meticulous. That's on me, and yeah. So
No, but I
please.
think the dynamics of the conversation make it very interesting to me. I am participating in this conversation, but I am also absorbing and a witness of where we're taking it and the meandering of it through history.
Mm-hmm.
And uh,
Mm-hmm.
thank you for the time as always, Alex,
Mm-hmm.
for the inspiration and for the alertness of your mind in pointing out that there is a certain extent, and also Anna today for pointing out that there is a certain extent of absorption of language that one must always question and reflect consistently because of
Mm-hmm.
the associations that that language stems from, because of the
Mm-hmm.
implications that that language carries. And today was a good example, a couple of examples of that, very good examples of that.
Yeah. And counterintuitive. Thank you for joining us. Um, and if you haven't subscribed to Counterintuitive Substack, then you must. Okay, and thank you. Best wishes from ours to Valencia is one of my favorite places, and yeah, I particularly enjoyed the paella from Valencia. So it's nice to know that there's somebody there. And yeah, so thank you, and thank you guys for coming and spending your time. Um, oh gosh, I didn't even deal with Venezuela,
Oh,
but
but
yeah, then that's a thing. I mean, uh, that's I might come on and just talk about what's happening in Venezuela, but the whole terrain has completely changed.
yes.
And what
Oh,
I've realized is that Trump, Trump was Trump actually in I would say that Trump played a masterful hand.
for now.
No, it's a masterful hand. The point is that now that you open that, that the nature of that kind of politics is that it opens the intended, but more so the unintended.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll do a special episode later this week on what's going on in Venezuela.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because it is going to do some things in the region that I think we should be prepared for.
Yeah, and it's central to this thing,
Hmm.
the death of globalization. It is the Americans asserting their regionality. Okay. All right. And Obama on YouTube has a video which
Yes.
he discusses it from his presidential position
Hmm.
or his ex-presidential position, and it's a good listen.
It's a good listen. Thank you
All right.
indeed, Alex.
Okay. See you
Bye.
guys.
So.
Take care. Bye.